Thanks so much for joining us for our Inspirational Women in Sailing breakfast. This was going to originally be an in-person breakfast at Middle Harbour Yacht Club. However, of course, because of the lockdown, that wasn't possible. The advantage of that is it's allowed us to open it up to a broader audience. So we've got people joining us from around the world, actually, and across Australia, both as panelists and as participants. So massive thank you to everyone for joining. If you don't know me, my name's Deborah Dalziel. I'm the women's sailing representative at Middle Harbour Yacht Club, also the founder of MySail, which is an app to help people go sailing more often. So we are going to get going because we have a very busy group of speakers with us today who are slipping boats and preparing boats for adventures and all kinds of things. And I'm sure we have a lot of busy people in the audience. So our first speaker this morning is the amazing Lisa Blair. I'm just going to unmute her. I think you're on mute, Lisa, which is my fault, so I'll get you to unmute yourself. There we go. Great. And Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. So I won't go too much into Lisa's background because I'd like her to kind of explain it herself, but Lisa has 3 world records under her belt already, and she's preparing to set off on her 4th, which she's going to tell us about today. Lisa, before we get into that, could we just start by maybe giving us a little bit of your sailing background, kind of what sparked your interest in sailing, and when and where did you get started?
Awesome. Well, morning, everybody. So I'm joining you from Brisbane, so it's a little earlier up here. So basically, I discovered sailing when I was about 22, and I randomly got a job in the Whitsundays as the cook and the cleaner on a charter yacht. Fell in love with the lifestyle, the idea, like everything that goes on with sailing. I had an opportunity to sail a boat from Samoa to Hawaii, which kind of fostered my love of ocean sailing. And then it's just sort of growing from there. I did the Clipper Around the World Yacht Race, and then went into solo sailing and did the solo Trans-Tasman Yacht Race before the first Antarctica record, and so on and so forth.
Awesome. And yeah, so you have 3 world records already, and now attempting your 4th, which is going to be a very epic trip. Can you tell us what records are that you already hold, and then maybe tell us a little bit about what you're attempting to do this year?
Yeah, perfect. So in 2017, I set off to sail solo, non-stop and unassisted around Antarctica. Unfortunately, I dismasted 1,000 nautical miles from land in the Southern Ocean, and I ended up with a record as the first woman in history to sail solo around Antarctica with 1 stop, crossing all tracks below 45 degrees south. So that was a pretty epic record. That was my first record, and it took me about 3.5 years to kind of pull together, find a boat, find the sponsorship, make it happen. And then I sailed solo, non-stop and unassisted around Australia, where I was able to become the first woman to do so. And I broke the existing monohull speed record. So I established a new time there as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And so that first record attempt that you did, the solo non-stop unassisted around Antarctica, so you're about to head off on your second attempt for that, is what I understand. So why did you decide to do this again? I mean, it was obviously you ran into a little bit of a challenge on your first trip, and you decided that wasn't enough to stop you, so you're off on it again. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the dismasting, we actually wrote a book about it. It's called Facing Fear, and it's published by Australian Geographic. You can get it on my website. But basically, it was a extreme survival situation that very nearly cost me my life. But it also cost me the record that I'd focused and worked really hard for over the years. After surviving that moment and that scenario, I felt like I needed a bit of time to process and to sort of readjust after the trauma of that, because it was a very close call to come back, and I'm very thankful to be able to have these conversations with people now. And so it took me a few years to kind of feel like I was in the right mental space to be able to challenge that record again, but at no single moment was it ever something that I wasn't going to challenge again. So as soon as I was like doing the final leg, sailing from Cape Town back to Australia and finishing the record with one stop in 2017, I remember thinking, okay, no, I'm definitely going to come back and do this trip again. And I made that mental commitment like back then, and it's 4 years later. So I went and did a few other things in the meantime, and it's sort of been just circulating in the back of my head. And so I'm off to do it again. So Fedor Konyakov, a Russian sailor, in 2008 set the world record as the first person to sail solo, non-stop and unassisted around Antarctica below 45 South. John Sanders, who's a Western Australian sailor, is also considered somebody who's done the trip. It was just never formally kind of recognized, because he did a triple circumnavigation around the planet, and that meant one entire loop was in the Southern Ocean when he did that trip. So the original goal was to set the women's record, but then also break the overall speed record. I've never been a believer that we need to have, especially in the sport of sailing, a women's version of a record. It should just be the best sailor, and women are so equal in this sport as far as what we can do as competitors and what we can do, against a male's record, that I wanted to make sure that I was establishing the fastest overall speed record, not just the women's record as well. So that's the goal. Head back, do the fastest overall speed record. I'm doing a heap of science on board the boat as well. My boat's called Climate Action Now. So it's an amazing opportunity to utilize the boat and gather data for the science community in the middle of the Southern Ocean.
That's amazing. And Lisa, what is that time that you're trying to beat to achieve the record?
Good question. So Fedor Konyakov set the record in 102 days, 58 minutes and some seconds in 2008.
Okay, so that's the number to beat for you this year.
I'm aiming at 90, but I'm mentally aiming at 80 and hoping that I'll land at 90.
Okay. Wow, that would be like a big gap in that record. And what are you doing? You know, you obviously, like you said, with the dismasting on the first trip, obviously don't want to kind of run into that type of hurdle again. You never I guess, fully prevent these things, but what are you doing differently this time, say in your preparation or, you know, in your training and during the trip to try to get, you know, prevent some of these things from happening again?
Yeah, I mean, I do get that question quite a bit, and I believe that the preparation level that I had the first time was sufficient to do the trip. It ended up being caused by electrolysis, which basically meant that an electrical cable up the mast chafed through. The mast was then getting charged 12 volts live current, and then the power had nowhere to go. And so it would sit semi-charged until a wave would break over the boat and kind of earth it. And it meant then that at the swage fitting at the bottom where the wire connects to the rigging fitting, that little piece there has a bit of salt water sitting in it, and it just basically turned into a corrosive cell and chewed through the rigging wire in 4 months, because it was all brand new rigging wire, and caused the dismasting and ongoing survival situation. So basically this time I've brought the boat to Brisbane specifically so I could get a guy called David Lambourne to work on the rigging. He's one of the best riggers in Australia, but he also does the engineering side of things. So he looked at the mast that I managed to find in Cape Town and decided it wasn't going to be able to be doing the job. So we're actually gone for a whole new mast that's custom built for the boat, but it's not just built for the boat, it's built for this specific project in mind. So everything we're doing on it is with the idea of, can it do 20,000 miles? Can it do the Southern Ocean? Will the boat go through a rollover with the rigging established in this way? So those are all the kind of questions that we're kind of meeting and overcoming at the moment. And then for the electrical cabling, everything's got a nylon sleeve on it now. So it's like almost looks like sail cover material. So every cable running up the mast, it's in PVC conduits, but then it also has this sleeve covering over every cable. So if there's a rivet or something in the mast, because of the length of time I'm sailing, I'm technically doing like a year or a lifetime's worth of sailing on the boat in a couple of months. So that wear that you would normally have time to stop in port and do maintenance for and check and monitor, I don't have those opportunities. So we just have to prepare it that way. So yeah, those sorts of things. And then, you know, there's a massive refit that we've just been going through. So today's actually a huge day. The boat goes back in the water today at 10 o'clock. So it's pretty exciting.
It's really exciting, and we really appreciate you joining us. But just as you're about to get the boat back in the water, and I guess everyone, at least myself, like, we look at this trip and you think, while you're actually out there, wow, like what an amazing feat and how challenging that's going to be. But I guess like a massive part of this challenge is just getting the boat ready and learning everything you have to learn and actually getting to the water. So like, it sounds like you've really got your head into that and doing a massive amount of prep.
And surprisingly, like, even now, I still think the hardest part of any record or challenge or event like this, and maybe Bridie and Alice can chime in on this, but is getting to the start line. It's getting the boat prepped, getting the funding, the racing and the sailing side. We know how to sail, we know how to maneuver a boat, we know how to do those things. It's the figuring out all the challenges to overcome to get to the start line that I find the hardest. I think the only sort of excerpt from that rule would be the dismasting, because that was pretty terrifying.
I can't. Well, I mean, I can't actually imagine. Talking about that, do you have any kind of fears or doubts or anything going into this trip around, what might happen, and how are you kind of managing those types of feelings?
Yeah, it's a lot of thinking. A lot of visualizing. So I do tend to visualize a lot of these scenarios. So I'll sit quite often on the boat and be like, okay, if this scenario occurs, what would I do? And I'll just run through mentally scenarios, and I'll look at the layout on the boat, and I'll look at all the, where could I run a line if I need to use the emergency rudder? Where can I run a line if I need to be on emergency tiller? Can I steer the boat if it's too cold outside? Like, if I'm on emergency tiller, I have no autopilot, how am I going to steer? Like, so I just sort of run through all of these scenarios. And I think for anyone doing any kind of ocean sailing, especially if there is some nerves, like, I mean, you can't go in the Southern Ocean and not be slightly terrified because it's the Southern Ocean. And with the experience last time, that definitely was pretty shell shocking, and it took time to process and get over. And so I guess one question mark for me is, how will I react in my first storm? Like, I always get very kind of nervous and anticipation leading into the storm, because you just don't quite know how bad the storm's going to get. And then once the boat's doing okay and performing well in the conditions, then I'm quite comfortable in those conditions because I know the boat can take it. But that relies on me making sure that the boat is at its optimum, like best performance level, best safety level, that I've skipped no corners, that I've checked every box that I need to in the preparation of the trip. And if I have that, and there's zero doubts on the strength or integrity of the boat and the equipment that's on board, then it has a positive effect on your mental health at sea. But if you're unsure, and I've talked to a lot of women about this, where they might have sailed with a crew member and they didn't trust the skipper's knowledge or something that was on board the boat. So it's given them lack of faith that their boat's going to be able to go through this passage or go through these conditions. So I think a lot of what I feel in the Southern Ocean is very similar sort of style. You've got to trust your boat, trust your crew, trust your scenario.
Yeah, it's really good advice, and really, interesting. And I guess it's why putting so much work into the actual preparation of the boat to get yourself to the start line. You also mentioned some of that scientific equipment that you're taking on board for the voyage. What equipment are you taking, and what are you trying to actually achieve with that?
So the boat's called Climate Action Now. So I run a community sort of awareness program through all my sailing. I've been collecting Post-it note messages for the last sort of 5 years now. And every Post-it note I get is an environmental action from someone in the public that is something that they're doing to improve their environment, their community, picking up rubbish, turning lights off, having short showers, those sorts of actions. And then the boat is digitally wrapped in thousands and thousands of Post-it notes. And then that's sailed proudly through all the global media coverage across all these records, trying to elevate the conversation, but also sort of just show people that as individuals, we have the power to create change. Just starts with one action, just do one thing and start that process. And so because of that, and because I've been running that through all my sailing for years, I've been also wanting to do a lot of sort of support to the scientific community. And I'm very conscious that the oceans that I'm about to sail around are so remote that it's logistically pretty well impossible for them to get data points from those areas. So scientifically speaking, they get a lot of information off the main continents and then off Antarctica itself, but that belt of ocean in the Southern Ocean, there's like almost nothing. There's a few data strands where they've had a boat dip down a little lower or something, but there's basically nothing there. So I'm renting a unit called a subsea ocean pack research unit. It's the same style unit that was on the Volvo Ocean Race. I'm actually renting it from the Ocean Race. And so that's going on the boat, and it allows me to take sort of environmental data as I'm sailing. So it does PCO2, which is our carbon levels, which gives us a measure of the health of the ocean, its acidity, salinity, sea temperature, and then there's a few other calculations in there that I can't even pronounce, like chlorophyll, and there's a few other things there. And then there's a microplastic sampler on it. So I've partnered with IMOS in Australia and AIMS, the Australian Marine Research Institute, and we're taking microplastic samples the entirety of the record. And then all of that data gets kind of loaded up on this platform called Ocean Ops, which becomes free data for global scientists to use. I'm deploying drifter buoys for the Bureau of Meteorology. So I've got 8 drifter buoys that I'm deploying on the record. And then that'll become little baby weather stations for them. And we're also trying to set up a weather station hub on board my boat so that we can have a live update off the boat to the Bureau of Meteorology's platform, which then goes up into the World Meteorology Organization for free software for all global weather mapping to help influence that as another data point. And because they've got 0 data points in those regions, or very little, any kind of information you can give them is sort of well received and very necessary. I'm also taking part in a sea mapping study. So we're data logging from my depth sounder. So they're doing all the continental shelves and any seamounts. So that's all going into a program produced by NOAA, which is a volunteers program called the Seabed 2030. So yeah, there's lots happening. And I'm also just committed to doing a sleep research study with the Woolcock Sleep Research Centre. So we did that on the first record. We're doing it again this time, and we're going to use the data as a comparison point between my Australia record and this one. So a little bit of data.
I was going to say, because you don't have enough to do to prepare yourself. Exactly. So that's amazing. Yeah, we'll have to write a book about the science.
Just the science.
That's part of it. Yeah, it's amazing. We have a couple questions from our audience, which is great. And just for anybody else who, if you have questions for Lisa, we'll have a time for probably 1 or 2 questions. Just pop them in that Q&A. I've got one more question for Lisa, and then we'll jump to a couple of the audience questions. But I just wanted to ask you, like, if the audience is interested to learn more about, how to follow your voyage, or how to find out about your first voyage, or how to support you, let us know the different channels that people can follow you or support you on.
Awesome. So basically, when I'm at sea on record, there's live trackers. I blog daily. All of that is up on the website, which is lisablairsailstheworld.com. So you can find everything there. All the past projects, blogs, and everything are also up there. There's a bunch of videos. There's the teaser trailer for the documentary there. So you can definitely go to the website and check that out. You can get the book from there, which is the full first story. It's available in ebook form as well, so a little bit more portable for people. And then my social media channels are all exactly the same. So I'm pretty active on things like Facebook and Instagram when I'm in preparation mode. And then when I'm at sea, it basically all kind of feeds through the website and feeds down through to social media. So yeah, it's all Lisa Blair Sails the World. I am still trying to raise the last of the sponsorship. So if anyone out there does, is in a position to support, then please definitely do check it out on the website. There's a tab there called 360-degree sponsor. So you can actually become a degree sponsor of the record and get involved. And yeah, that would be fantastic. So take a look and share it around.
Yeah, great. And I'll send out a follow-up email to everybody afterwards, and we'll check that link in there. So if people want to find out more, they can. I've got a question here from Nadine. She's asking about thinking about your kind of mental, I guess, health and preparedness for this. What is it like spending that much time on your own?
Yeah, it's been coming up quite a lot since COVID hit. Isolation is something that the first record, I didn't really know how I would be able to cope with it. Like, I kind of thought I would be okay, but it's 3 months on your own in the Southern Ocean, fighting for your life almost every day. Like, are you going to be okay? Like, there's that kind of question mark on it. And the thing I realized was that every now and then I need a mental pick me up. I need, like, so my mum actually has been brilliant in this manner. I do weekly phone calls home. And in a weekly phone call, if she heard I was a bit flat or a bit down, she would actually then go onto my social media and grab all the comments from people following the record and email them to me. And then I would get to read through all these lovely comments, because sometimes you just feel quite isolated when you're out there, because I only have the sat phone and I only have my shore crew that I'm actually getting contact with. And so those sorts of things are really lovely. The other thing I found was that my mental health was directly linked to how much sleep I had had. It's become a very clear indicator that if I'm sleep deprived, my mental health crashes. If I can get more sleep, my mental health stabilizes and I become much more positive. And I get a lot less frustrated with things going wrong on the boat. So I would change my priorities when I start noticing my triggers, which is like, when I get so sleep deprived, I'm having a 2-year-old like toddler hissy fit on the deck of the boat because a rope's jammed or something, then I know I need to prioritize sleep. And so I'll change the strategies on the boat so I can get a little bit more sleep than I got recently, and sort of try and get myself back to a bit more of a steady mindset and physical sort of rest point. So yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah, that's great. Really good advice, especially as you said, people going through lockdown, which hopefully people, in Australia and Sydney, especially, we're starting to get out of that. The
other thing with that, though, that I find really interesting is that I choose to go on this trip. It's not something that's been forced upon me. It's something I've chosen to do. So the mental health, like the mental attitude around that is quite different to, like, for you guys in lockdown. It was something you didn't have in your control. It wasn't a choice of yours. So it changes the way you relate to it. The other thing is I have a dedicated debt. Like, I know there's an end date because the record only goes for so long. So, for you guys, it was this unknown. So yeah, it definitely changes how you relate to something like isolation or lockdowns.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Really interesting point of view. But I guess for anybody who is going to go off on their own sailing adventures, looking at that sleep, I know I definitely get a bit like you sometimes if I don't have sleep. Get a bit grumpy. So yeah, that's some really good advice. And look, Lisa, that's probably all the time we have for questions for Lisa, because she needs to run off and get her boat out of the water, and get prepared for your round Antarctica voyage. But thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I'll send out that link to everybody as well. Like I said, so if anybody wants to know more about Lisa's trip and what she's doing, then take a look at her website. Thanks again, Lisa, and best luck.
Thanks, everybody.
For the boat.
Awesome. Thank you. And see you soon.
Thank you.
Good luck, Bryony and Alice. Have a great day.
See you, Lisa.
Bye.